Greetings and welcome to a bonus episode of the Sustaining the Herd podcast brought to you by Agri-Services and Engineering of Raymond, Nebraska. I'm your host, Andrew Wadle, joined in the studio with my co-host, Brock Vitek.
Hey, Andrew.
So Brock and I are a bit saddle sore after just returning from the Biogas Americas conference in Detroit, Michigan. And for our returning listeners, some of you may recall that episode number 52, Brock and I talked about kind of what we were expecting, what we were anticipating in coming across at the Biogas Americas conference. And so we're just looking to get caught up with you on what we saw, what we experienced. Is that about right, Brock?
Yeah, that sounds great. It was a good time, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And well, first a shout out to we're encountering some of our listeners when we're in our natural environment in places like biogas meetings. And just a shout out to Craig Hartman from Hartman Engineering in California. It was great to see you, Craig, and we appreciate you continuing to tune in.
Hey, Craig.
And so Brock, let's just get together with folks on this bonus episode, and just we last episode we talked about what we were kind of anticipating out of the meeting. Let's kind of circle back, as they say, and hey, what are some of your thoughts on the meeting?
Yeah, well, this probably doesn't need to be on the list, but just a fun item is I could see Canada from my hotel room.
How about that?
So that was a fun, silly item to put on the list, I suppose. Well, my mom will enjoy hearing that.
Yeah, that just adds to the mystique of you being an international man of mystery, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So aside from seeing Canada from my hotel room, and hey, Mom, shout out to Mom, in addition to Craig from Hartman Engineering, it was just a good time, as always, to have some FaceTime with former and current clients. We're traveling and on site with clients fairly often, but still a lot of virtual meetings and phone calls. That's just the world we live in today. So whenever we can sit down and interact face to face with the people we do business with every day, it's always a good day. So that was great to catch up on projects new and old and see some familiar, friendly faces. Always a highlight for me.
Yep, and one of the benefits of going to these meetings is to kind of learn what's new and what's going on, what's hot. And we're quite pleased to say that of the things that are hot and going on, we just happen to be part of one of those things. And some of you may have seen the press release last week that Neogenics, which is a joint venture formed by HASI and Ameresco, they announced an anaerobic digester project at Adams Land and Cattle in Broken Bow, Nebraska. This would be an anaerobic digester for 150,000 head of beef cattle. So this is really, really big news. It's exciting for us personally, but it's also really, really cool for the anaerobic digestion industry and the beef cattle industry as well.
Yeah, and a fun tidbit about that project is it's not just 150,000 head of beef cattle, but it's 150,000 head of beef cattle on roller compacted concrete, something we've talked a lot about between ourselves and with our colleagues here on the podcast. So a few innovations coming together in a really neat project there in Broken Bow, Nebraska.
Yeah, so stay tuned. There's going to be more coming on that, but it'll be the first of a kind and super exciting.
Yeah, Andrew, it's fun to be able to talk about that publicly here on the podcast. We've been working on that, known about that project for a while now, but we've had to keep quiet until things were official. So it's an exciting day, isn't it?
Yep, absolutely. It's a huge deal, and of course it involved investors and complex offtakes and things, and so
it takes a village. Absolutely.
Yep. And here we are, and just kind of speaking of offtakes, Brock, what did you gain from Biogas Americas when it comes to offtakes?
Yeah, well, we had Lasana on recently from S&P Global Energy, and he helped us understand where the markets are. Markets aren't great. Offtake is difficult at the moment. I should say it remains somewhat difficult, but I really gathered a sense of optimism at Biogas Americas, Andrew. Even though folks probably aren't doing projects as aggressively as they were over a year ago, it's not like things have come to a screeching halt either. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, but I think that this difficult market is making people sharpen their pencil, and that ultimately better projects will come out of it, and better in terms of, being as capital efficient as possible, making sure things work, because the risk and the stakes are a bit higher in this offtake environment right now.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't think it's a mischaracterization to say that really right now it would seem as though a lot, if not everything, is hinging on the maritime market.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, it's, I don't know, it almost feels like most of the eggs are in that basket at that moment. But I guess I'm encouraged by the things that we hear, that the maritime market is going to come to fruition and really make some of these markets go, or make some of these projects go.
Yeah, I enjoyed attending a panel on the maritime fuels. I believe that was on the second day of the conference on Wednesday, and it was just interesting to hear from folks who've been spending pretty much the last year spending a lot of time traveling and attending meetings and hearings and just keeping a pulse on maritime and really lobbying for the industry as well. And one takeaway for me from that maritime fuels outlook breakout session was that I think we've mentioned this on the podcast before. About a year ago, the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, decided to postpone a vote on setting some clean fuel regulations. And I think they either pushed it back a year or didn't put a date on it. I can't remember for sure. But either way, a comment was made on the panel at Biogas Americas that, in hindsight, it's probably a good thing that vote didn't happen when it was originally going to, because haste can make waste, and better policy is probably going to come out of having more time to get everyone together to talk about what actually makes sense and is good for both the maritime industry and for fuel producers. Haste makes waste. That's an age-old adage, but that really stuck out to me from the maritime discussion.
Yep, absolutely, and absolutely. So I think we're heading in the right direction, or at least a better direction there. And speaking of panel discussions, I'll mention what I thought was the highlight. I think the highlight is just interacting with our industry partners and friends and whatnot. But the highlight program-wise was the producer panel, and we really need to get more producers, digester operators involved in these meetings, because they're incredibly insightful. And on the producer panel in particular was Greg Bethard from High Plains Ponderosa Dairy in Liberal, Kansas. And Greg is one of these people who is one of our industry visionaries. These guys are big thinkers. They're not thinking today. They're not thinking a month. They're thinking years and years down the line. And as a big thinker, what Greg said in this panel was, if we are still talking about chasing RNG 10 years from now, we've missed the boat. Yeah. No pun intended. Do you remember him talking about this, Brock?
I actually did not make it to that panel. Was in a meeting with a current client. We don't see each other much, so we were catching up, and it ran in, so I didn't make that one. So fill me in.
So what Greg said was, when you look at biogas, there's lots of other stuff. We're always talking about the methane, but if we break it down, it's carbon and hydrogen. Well, plus all the other nasties and things that who knows what can be done with that. But what Greg is saying is that if we're just still talking about just simply making renewable natural gas, we've missed the boat, and that we need to develop this as far as what other value-added products can come from manure-derived biogas.
Yeah, I completely agree with that statement from Greg. Yeah, if we're still talking about RNG in 10 years, what are we doing? Because I think, there's the compounding of value add over the years. And I think we don't even know what's next, but RNG is probably the feedstock for some other, perhaps more advanced biofuels or other products that can be made out of it, and not even knowing what those are yet.
Yep. The other thing that Greg said was, I was sitting there thinking, digester developers, do you all hear this? He said, nothing that happens at that digester site should affect the way I operate my dairy. My paraphrase of that is, we don't need you,
We've definitely talked about that before when we've spoken to two developers of the show here, haven't we?
Well, developers, it's still a lesson that's not fully been learned. And so in essence, what Greg said was, there needs to be the proverbial valve. So when something goes wrong at the digester, a valve is turned and manure goes around the digester, and whatever happens at the digester does not impact what's going on in the dairy one tiny bit. And I think that is I hope every developer took notes on that, because that's a huge point. What dairymen are what first, Brock?
Dairymen
are dairymen first, and they're biogas producers second, a distant second.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a reality situation. So producer panel, Greg Bethard, that was a absolute home run.
Awesome. Love to hear that.
Yeah, and actually another cool part was of that producer panel was, animal agriculture has been kind of attacked when it comes to biogas production, because animal agriculture, particularly dairy, has been accused of expanding in order to produce more renewable natural gas. Whereas they talked about that and how it's just not true. Brooks Dairy was the other panelist, and the operator there. She said, the digester's actually helping us to remain small, smaller by today's dairy standards. And I thought that was a really cool perspective, is that they're not growing because of a biogas plant. They are staying right size for them.
Yeah.
And the biogas plant's making that happen.
The dairy needs a certain amount of revenue to exist at the headcount they're at today, right? And as cost of production goes up, it's probably either get more cows or find other revenue, and perhaps biogas is that other revenue stream.
That's right.
So another topic that I was hoping to hear about, and we did hear about, is CO2 as an additional revenue source, and I really think it is gaining some momentum. I gathered that at the conference, especially as it relates to tax incentives and tax credits. CO2 can be sold, and it certainly has a market value. But I think the tax incentives actually carry maybe even more value than that. So that was just interesting to hear that that's something that a few years ago we kind of heard about, thought may or may not turn into anything, and it's a real thing today.
Yeah. Yep. And then as I go through my notes, I think about like when we did our episode 52, one of the things we talked about are what are the things we would like to see, but we expect not to see.
Yes.
And that list did not disappoint, or at least my anticipation, intuition was not wrong, because, as designers, as engineers, we think about the system. It's not a biogas plant. It's an animal operation, dairy feedlot, whatever, right through to the gas cleanup or whatever the value-added product is. And nutrient separation. We just, manure effluent is part of a biogas plant, and we just can't be so focused on biogas that we can't forget about the other effluent stream from these plants. And it's not just an issue for biogas plants, anaerobic digester systems. It's for the industry. So, there's lots of places that we can go to find information, or there's lots of people that are working on these nutrient issues. But it would be really good that if we talked more about the complete system, the complete digester system, which includes the nutrient management piece.
Yeah, as you always say, being the great agricultural engineer that you are, it's everything's a mass balance, right? Yeah. How many ships of potash come into the U.S. every year, and how many leave? Yeah. It's a mass balance, and it's maybe a bit out of balance. Yeah.
So we're going to continue to participate like crazy in ABC events, and hopefully bring our system agricultural engineers and their agricultural sensibilities approach to these projects. Some of that will include talking more about anaerobic digestion.
Yeah.
Nutrient separation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so this was a great event. We look forward to the next ABC event for us will be Business of Biogas in St. Louis in October of 2026. So that'll be a good one. So looking forward to that.
Always great meetings.
Yeah. And just want to say thank you to all of our listeners, both new and returning, for choosing to join us today for this brief recap of our wonderful experience at Biogas Americas in Detroit, Michigan here recently. And while this is a bonus episode, throwing us off a little bit of our regular cadence, we will be back again in 1 week, back to our regularly scheduled programming with a more typical episode for us here on Sustaining the Herd. Until then, thanks for joining the herd today.